I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I've hit the live button.
Cool. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to MAASIN's February Town Hall, specifically for parents and guardians of new drum corps students. My name is Cameron Guerrero. I'm going to be facilitating the event this evening. I am a MAASIN Corps member, a high school band and orchestra director, and on the admin staff for the Blue Devils. Rand, you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rand. You've seen me on a lot of MAASIN live streams before, but today I am joining as a panelist and not as a facilitator. I'm the founder of MAASIN, and I also chair our whistleblower support committee. I have done admin staff for both world class and open class corps, as well as sound sport, where I marched in the Canadian circuit.
Genevieve, you go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Genevieve Geisler, and I am the CFO and COO of Bluecoats, and I'm also the co-corps director of Bluecoats. And I have been a drum corps administrator in one capacity or another for Bluecoats for almost 20 years. And I believe they want me to mention in this, I am a whole parent of actual people, which is very unusual, I think, of drum corps administrators or people working in drum corps because of the traveling aspect, I'm sure. So I have two little girls. So I hope that lends some experience I can bring to this panel as well.
And then last is Nina.
Hello. So my name is Nina. I have been an administrator or worked as a volunteer and administrator with the Blue Knights for essentially the last 10 years. And as well as just taking a little bit of time to do some teaching in some very small drum corps environments, like the Southern Knights down in Alabama during the 2017 season. I've spent a lot of time in different various positions, all the way from being just a volunteer to teaching. So I have tried to bring all of this to the table here. So
Cool. All right, well, let's dive right in. First question is, what would you say are the differences between participating in high school marching band and independent ensembles in WGI, DCI, and DCA? Let's have a free-for-all on this one, whomever wants to talk first.
All right, so I would say that the biggest primary difference that you'll see in all of these groups is the amount of time that's dedicated to each of them. When you're in marching band, or say like marching band usually only has about 1 or 2 weeks, 1 to 2 days per week, usually dedicated to an extra rehearsal outside of the normal school schedule. Whereas when you're getting into the WGI realm, now your weekends are actually being the thing that are being taken up as that additional time. And then as well as drum corps, what it does is the extra part of that season is like during the season, now you are full-time committed between the months of usually the midway through May all the way through August. So the time commitment becomes a full-term commitment by that point. So this is one of the primary differences, I believe, to participating on each of these levels.
I think to piggyback off what Nina said, I think she really hit the nail on the head there. Like, it's a fully immersive experience when you do DCI, and I think that makes it really different, in many aspects, even though sometimes the products are similar for high school marching band and DCA and WGI. I think that's the primary thing that makes DCI different, at least if you're doing a world-class corps. And I think that is what, more so than just all the time. I think that's what changes the commitment and the way that people interact with each other, because it's sort of like going away to boarding school or college, and that you're living with the people that you're creating a drum corps show with or creating art with, and just like you would be at boarding school in high school or in college if you're older. So you have to learn to do your own laundry and basically take care of your own, you're fed, but you have to make sure you do things regularly, eat regularly, take more personal responsibility for yourself, I think, than you would, especially in high school marching band. So to me, I have the most experience with DCI, and I think that's the biggest difference for sure. I think that the, world-class color guard and percussion ensembles have some of the things going on the weekends, and even more so where they don't provide everything for you all the time, but they don't quite have the immersive quality of constantly being around the same group of people, or being completely responsible for you taking care of your own person as when it comes to like laundry and being responsible to eat and do basic tasks on time.
I would also say that one of the biggest differences that I usually think of is kind of like the oversight structure. Because I guess when you're thinking of like, high school bands in your area, they're all going to be kind of like managed by your district. There's kind of just generally more like oversight on kind of like a broader level than there is with independent ensembles. I'd say that picking an independent ensemble is a lot more like, kind of picking a college, I guess. You got to like really kind of suss them out, see which one is the right vibe and feel for you, which ones you feel comfortable at, which ones you kind of feel a connection to and feel like you would thrive in for the summer or the weekends or something, where that you're going to be spending like a lot of time at. And also see which ones that are going to be, good for you personally. Like, unfortunately, we are at a point in the activity where students who are marginalized do have to think about like, okay, does this core have good policies for trans people? Do I see myself represented in the membership and the staff of this core? Do I feel like this is a place that I want to spend lots of time in? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's a good point comparing it to choosing a college. You really have to think about those type of issues as well as like the quote unquote vibe, and meshing with it yourself. Not that there's a good, wrong, or right choices per se. It's just the choices are different based on your individual characteristics and personality. And so you have to be, mindful of that when you're making a choice. And I think what you mentioned about oversight, is important on a more, I guess, on like a smaller level in that, there's a different type of oversight in high school band versus what there's going to be at a world-class drum corps. And even different from that, like WGI groups, because sometimes that's not going to have really any oversight at all. During rehearsal and things like that, but you're not necessarily, depending on the group, really staying together or staying in a supervised area. Where in drum corps, you actually, you are in a somewhat supervised environment all the time because you're together all the time traveling with all the administrators and teachers. So it's a little bit different.
That's true. That's also a great segue into our next question, which specifically asks about differences between high school and high school marching band and pageantry arts and drum corps and WGI, whatever. They ask who sets or the lines not to cross in a drum corps. So like, in a high school, band directors are the ones who tell you what to do and what not to do. And it's really easy because they're the ones in charge. In a DCI setting, they're wondering, is it staff or leadership? Is there a member who we should look to for setting what is acceptable norms in the corps? Maybe Rand, do you want to take this one to start?
Sure. So I'd say it's definitely kind of a combination of your staff, particularly your admin, but also your student leadership. So your student leadership, like your drum majors and section leaders, are kind of meant to be the go-between between admin and students. And together, I'd say that these people are kind of really the ones who are looking at making sure everybody's, acting in a way that facilitates a healthy, safe, and happy learning environment for everyone. So of course, the admin are going to be like developing those policies to set forward for everybody, but then the students who are in leadership and also the staff are the ones who are really making sure those policies are upheld by everyone, which is kind of like the short answer. Personally, I do kind of think of it as like everybody's responsibility. Like if you see something not okay happening, you should say something, but it's definitely like the responsibilities of particularly the admin and any student leadership to be reporting to the admin if something kind of not cool is happening.
Yeah, I also want to tag in on that. There was a phrase that kind of pops into my mind from the last question, but very specifically, it is the phrase that there are no band parents in drum corps. And this actually also goes and coincides with DCA because we haven't mentioned Drum Corps Associates also runs off of a WGI schedule. Also the same level of oversight that usually comes with WGI. Odds are they're usually not administrative staff. And if there are, then odds are they're usually also members of the Drum Corps themselves. So once again, the hierarchy or like kind of that reporting system is sort of built into the member base, and it kind of works its way up from that member base to essentially the admin, to essentially the corps director. But if there's any part of this that is seen, if the admin or one of the tour directors catches something that's going on, we don't have to go up that chain per se in order to take immediate action in a lot of these cases. Whereas when it starts on a lower part, if it starts with a member, we do really work through like that member reporting to the staff member and that staff member coming to the admin and so on and so forth. But if any of the admin or if the core director himself or themselves actually catch any of those things going on, usually action is taken almost immediately.
Yeah, I would say, when it comes to drum corps, it really starts at I guess maybe that comes from what it is that I do, like being the CFO and COO, but like I work together a lot with the CEO, obviously, but also our board of directors, and it's the two executives and the board of director who create and maintain our policy manual and maintain all of our policies, and I'm sure many drum corps are the same way. And much of that policy is available to anybody by going to the website of a world-class drum corps, and if you can't find it on the website, you can find it by contacting either the administration or usually like a general email address. And I think that's a really good place to start, to look to where those, what are those policies and where do I go with a problem, or how are problems handled. Now, of course, it's up to the people that are administering those policies to actually make sure they follow through with them. So that's only the policies, of course, are only the first step. But I do think that's a big part of creating the culture of an individual drum corps. And I think that's something as a parent that I would look at, like when you're trying to find that cultural fit for you and your student. To either, check out what those policies are and also ask if you can't find them, or just be prepared to create a dialogue with people administering the group and see if you feel comfortable with how they administer those policies. But like Nina said, it does come down to, setting up that culture so that all staff people and all students not only feel like they should report things back, but also know that they have a contractual obligation, either as a part of their staff or membership contract, to report things back, and also that you have a culture where people feel comfortable doing that. And so I think that all kind of feeds into each other, and is something to look at if you're trying to find a good fit for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that both advocating for drum corps posting their policies and procedures on their website, and also advocating for drum corps to have actual contracts for their staff members, those are both things that we as MAASIN have very much advocated for, largely for that reason, just for more transparency, so that we can hold people accountable, or so that drum corps can hold people accountable, and so parents know exactly what their students are getting into, what their children are getting into. So moving forward with the policy situation, there's a question asked about the dorm room shower situation, mentioning that they've heard stories of body shaming to the point where people maybe don't even feel comfortable going in to take a shower. Is that something that you have experienced, maybe not at your drum corps, but heard about happening, or what policies does your corps have in place to keep that from happening? Genevieve, do you want to start this one?
Yeah, sure. Just as a caveat, I never actually marched drum corps, even though I've been doing this for a very long time. So I don't want to speak from an experience that I never had as a member, but certainly our policies would be in place that would, make it so, if anyone were to do something like that, which I personally haven't really heard about as a big problem, but the body shaming thing would certainly be a reportable, I don't want to say not a crime, happening, a reportable happening that we would certainly deal with at an administrative level if someone were to report that to us. That's not something I've ever had happen. But basically, as far as dorm rooms and showers and all of that, we do spend a lot of time in 2 to 3 person dorm rooms with private bathrooms. So perhaps, for the first 5 to 6 weeks at Bluecoats of our time together. So perhaps that, that's a totally different situation in which you can choose. You're basically choosing your own roommate or roommates, and then, it's much like college. You're not having necessarily a huge exposure to other people that way. So I'm not sure if that's a factor, but certainly as we travel down the road with the locker rooms, that's going to be much like any travel sport. It's really the same as travel soccer or, AAU basketball or any type of traveling team. You're going to be, showering and traveling together and doing that kind of thing. And it's certainly, it certainly has a few challenges for the administrative staff when it comes to, gender and that kind of thing, but it's all something that we take very seriously and lay out for everybody, and we honestly haven't had a lot of issues surrounding that particular thing in my experience.
Yeah. Nina, do you want to share any different policies that you might have at your organization, or anything different you've experienced in the DCI or DCA world or anything like that?
So the differences, or the first thing I want to note is that, even given my current identity, I based my entire experiences from the male orientation of this whole thing, because I did not come out until after I aged out. So my experience, and it's coming from my experience with this, there really isn't a lot of body shaming in the shower, and male culture is kind of like really reserved actually in the shower. And it takes some opening up a lot of the time for a lot of that community stuff to happen, because in the very beginning it's like everybody, because not every drum corps, because I've worked at a couple of different organizations, and not every drum corps gets a chance to stay in a dorm in the very beginning. It's like, for example, even a lot of Southern California corps, which is where I kind of started, they house in different houses with different members and different members' parents and stuff like that. So they get to start with this group of people, and they all do have a much more private situation until they actually get on the road. Whereas, like, I've watched at other groups where from the very beginning we were in a gym showering in very communal showers and locker rooms. And in the very beginning, you'll see like a couple of students just like be very reserved about engaging in that. But within the first week, usually everybody's fairly open about that experience. I've personally never seen anything around body shaming in those situations. As a matter of fact, as the season goes on, I see a lot more people become open and comfortable with those showering situations. And we've even had a couple of unique cases of people with different gender identities who wanted to shower in different scenarios and having to be accommodating for those people. And so that is something we see. That is something I have seen at multiple organizations. As far as writing policies concerned, policies about showering is generally follows the same around sexual harassment and misconduct in that. So there's really nothing specifically for showering type situations, but I've just seen a lot of people get much more comfortable with it as they go along in the season, more so than generally seeing people get, ostracized or shamed while doing this throughout the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's been my experience too. I think that generally it's actually sort of a bonding experience, even where you just, after the end of the day or whatever, you see everybody in there, and it's just something that everybody has to do. Rand, we're going to move on to a new question for you, kind of in the same vein of personal space and just like, new experiences for drum corps students, members. Personal space on the buses or life on the bus is something that's really unique to the organization, to this activity. And specifically having, a bunch of people in their late teens or early 20s on a bus moving around the country. Could you maybe speak to a couple of the challenges and also just like general bus norms maybe through the activity?
Sure. So something that is, I guess, really special about DCI in particular is that like the bus becomes your house for like the actual season, I know there's at least 5 people out there laughing at how House came out. Give me one moment. Yeah, so because the bus becomes your home for the season, you really have to take care of it, and you have to really kind of be mindful that your space is kind of really like your seat, and you can't really infringe on anybody else's space, but it's kind of really hard, also at the same time kind of hard not to, just because everybody is all up everywhere. A bus is not ultimately that spacious, unfortunately. So it's kind of rare that you'd have 2 seats to yourself. Usually everybody is having a seat partner, so somebody who would be with them for the duration of the season, which usually, is somebody you end up becoming really close friends with, somebody you end up really bonding with, because you're essentially like living together in your little tiny like unit for the season. So personal space is definitely a challenge, and that's something to kind of be like communicated with your seat partner, to be like, okay, this is what I'm okay with. This is what I'm okay with. This is where I'm keeping my stuff. This is where we're keeping your stuff. Do you want to kind of have a shared area? Do you really want to keep your stuff separate? Also kind of matters with like other people's behavior on the bus. I will be honest, sometimes people do try to do things that are inappropriate to do on a bus. And when other people notice those things, ideally they should say, hey, that is not an appropriate thing to be happening on this bus. I would consider inappropriate things to be on the bus, obviously anything sexual. If somebody is doing anything, you should be telling somebody else. So somebody, ultimately higher than you, whether it is a section leader on the bus, whether it is your bus captain, whether it is an admin member who you have a contact with, or a staff member or something. I think that everybody on the bus kind of also needs to be talking to each other about, okay, what are we going to find acceptable on this bus, and understanding that if there is a whole bus activity, it needs to be something that anybody can participate in. It can't be anything classified as hazing, which I find that I think Crossman is a really good policy on hazing. That's one that I've liked because it defines it in such a way that I think is easy to understand, which is like, would you be prepared to defend these actions to your parents? Would you be prepared to defend these actions to your administrators? Would you be prepared to defend these actions in a court of law? Which sounds very dramatic, I guess, but you have to remember that because this space is ultimately, depending on the core, usually shared by people who are minors and are over 18, you really have to be mindful of these things. And so I would encourage everybody to kind of look into the bus policies at your core. Like, for example, do they allow people to be seat partners if one is a minor and one is not a minor, et cetera, et cetera. Some cores actually also put all their minors on one bus to kind of, help out with these kinds of things, but I'm sure the others also have stuff to add. I don't want to ramble about bus politics and space for forever.
Yeah, either of you, if you have anything to add, please.
Yeah, like I said, I never marched drum corps, so I don't have that bus experience, but I certainly have the experience of being a staff member on the bus. And the personal space thing is exactly the same. You have to. People will be pretty quick to tell you if you're not doing a good job at making that work. But I think one thing, the bus can be really nice and fun too. And I think that, you choose your own, bus seat partner. And if there's a problem, you can move and that kind of stuff. And yes, we have a policy same for dorm rooms. Like if you're a minor, you have to be a seat partner with another minor, unless your parents give explicit written permission for you to be a roommate or seat partner with someone else, which often happens because, let's say two females that one's 18, one's 17, and they're friends and they're in the same section and there are a lot of other girls in that section. It makes absolute sense, but we do require someone's parents' permission. That's the rules that we have now. So, we do have those kind of things in place. And I think everything Rand said about, making sure that people feel comfortable reporting higher up the chain if they do have a problem is probably the most important thing. And also making sure your students are mindful, people have cell phones. Would you be prepared if someone if someone reported what you're doing right now, would you be in trouble? That's the thing to keep in mind. I think that was a really good point.
Absolutely. So keeping in that kind of vein, and Rand, you and Genevieve both brought up the same idea of working things up like the chain of command. And there's a question specifically about that. What is the sort of order of power or seniority? If there's an issue with a member, do you go to staff? If you have an issue with staff, who do you go to? Maybe Nina, you can start us off with this one.
So from the member hierarchy, I've known that a lot of the time we establish the culture as the members, first of all, trying to essentially kind of govern themselves using their student hierarchy, starting with when it comes to things like logistics or what's the word I'm looking, actually, there's the word of general conduct, I guess, with rehearsal and rehearsal etiquette, usually the first thing that they go to is the section leaders. If there is anything outside of the section leaders, the hierarchy generally tends to go to if they have some corps will have an additional captain or a lieutenant or something like that. In the brass line, we had a brass lieutenant as well, or a horn line captain. These people are also kind of responsible for the hierarchy and logistical, providing any kind of logistical input and reporting anything with conduct. Outside of that, that's when it starts to move to the instructional staff. And the instructional staff and the admin realm, to me, are kind of essentially the same realm. Because usually when it gets to the instructional staff, that is when it becomes a conversation about what are the next steps that we're actually going to do with the student in particular. And because that requires sometimes a lot of us are the admin's input or the admin's logistics as far as if we have to move this person or not. So usually when it gets to that realm, though, most of the time there's enough collaboration within that instructional staff and administrative staff realm that's as far as it needs to go. However, they're still also getting to the tour director, and you also have the you would say like your core directors at any of those points if they're actually available. Not core directors aren't always available on tour to help with every situation in real time, which is why we've been able to delegate that responsibility to assistant directors and any kind of assistant tour administrators that are there. That's usually where the realm actually, that's like the highest I would say in this ladder is usually as far as it goes. And then after that, if it comes to like a very large organizational issue, then you would be talking about including the board of directors, but that's normally not something that's handled on the basic point of conduct. So, when we're dealing with things on a day-to-day basis, that's usually the chain that I described as the chain that it usually goes to.
Yeah. Rand, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, my first thought was it honestly really depends on the issue. If it's like a small issue, like, this person's annoying me during block, or this person keeps like moving my water jug, like, talk to your section leader, just ask them to stop. But if it's like an issue, like this person is harassing me, this person is being racist, this person has assaulted me, then you would really need to talk to somebody else. And I would recommend you usually go to whatever admin staff you trust most. Because as we know, like the director won't always be on tour, the tour director won't always be on tour. There, unfortunately, just due to the nature of the activity, there is a bit of like a rotating nature of cast happening, staff happening. So I would say talk to the staff member you trust most, preferably an admin staff member, if it's like a serious issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and move along, actually. I think the next one, Genevieve, maybe you can help us out with this. Probably from a member, will we be able to see our parents after shows? And maybe we can approach that from both a world-class kind of lens and also maybe a open or even DCI or WGI.
Yeah, so generally speaking, you will absolutely be able to see your parents after shows, like COVID-19 notwithstanding. I mean, like they only always throughout the history of my time working in drum corps, everyone gets together with their family or parents or friends from another drum corps right after after the show every time. And that's one of the most fun times of the tour. People are eating in the parking lot and they're hanging out with their friends and family from home. There's always, every show is someone's home show, and it's nice, just unfortunately in 2021 that was not possible due to COVID. I certainly hope that it will be for 2022, but that's certain in the normal course of normal life. That is certain. You certainly can and are encouraged to see your friends and family after shows.
Totally. So I'm going to continue with you, Genevieve, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The question says, Drum Corps have no legally binding affiliations with accredited schools or governments. So is there anything or anyone that really enforces core or DCI safety policies are followed or enforced other than, the laws that are in a given area where the core might be?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is that certainly within the organization itself, there should be a structure that makes sure that the policies of the group are followed. If you have a strong organizational structure with a board of directors that's independent from the executives, that that oversees the administrative staff, that then oversees the instructional staff, you should have many avenues available for dealing with reporting issues and making sure policies are followed. And certainly no one at any level of that should have any problem reprimanding, enforcing, or even letting go staff and students. I have certainly done all of those things myself when it comes to violation of, organizational policies. I mean, we are, it's a nonprofit corporation that's subject to, there's legal liability for the board of directors, for instance, or for the core administrators or directors. And so while there's not an overarching, I guess, governmental something like there might be at a state college, I don't think it's that different in just a much smaller scale than something like a private school. So, that's one way that I would look at it. And certainly within DCI, there is some level of policy enforcement. While they don't tell you exactly what most policies have to be, they do mandate that you have specific policies. And part of what they also do is that, whatever policy you do set, you're supposed to follow it internally. And as you've seen with some situations that have happened, that's really what people get in trouble for. It's not following properly their own internal policies, or not providing sufficient, supervision or follow up on their own internal policies themselves. And I will also say that, DCI, nobody's perfect, and neither are the Bluecoats, and neither is DCI, but they do follow up on all of the complaints that they get that they can follow up on, or whistleblowers, things like that. And so do the Bluecoats, and I'm sure most corps do too, but I can only speak for my own personal experience at Bluecoats and with DCI. If someone sends something in to DCI, they follow up with the corps. I've been followed up with. Sometimes the things are serious, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's like chicken nuggets, So but they do follow up, and sometimes, if it's about, they'll follow up with, they know how to follow up with someone that it's not about, I guess you could say. And within within an individual corps, we do the same thing. It takes up a lot of resources, a lot of time of all the people that are doing the administration. And I know that the same is for DCI. Well, so while I know it's not perfect, they do follow up on tons of that stuff. We also all don't have the ability to share that publicly easily at all, because of the liability that we face, and because of privacy issues, and because many of their complaints are anonymously submitted. We have no way of following up with people. I'm personally responsible for doing pretty much any follow-up on anything that's to do with anything related to sexual harassment, marginalized groups, anything like that within the Bluecoats. And I've received whistleblower things, as far back as like the 1980s. Just things you can't always do something about everything, but we do try pretty hard to follow up on all that stuff and to be responsible. And I think that DCI does too, even though I know it's not perfect.
Yeah, Rand, I'd like to hear from you on this. I know you have kind of a unique perspective, having been at a corps that was kind of forced to fold. So if you could add your perspective. I mean,
that's kind of sad.
Because I don't think I explicitly said this for anybody watching. I did work at Oregon Crusaders in 2017 and 2018, so their last 2 seasons. Thanks, Cameron. Thanks for the reminder. Man, what was the question again? Okay, the question is, drum corps have no legally binding affiliations. Who's making sure? Yeah, ideally it should be, your admin staff, like your upper admin staff, who are making sure that these things are properly dealt with, and making sure that, even if a survivor chooses to, say, not take legal action for somebody who sexually assaulted them, if you do have like proof of any sort of admission through like text or screenshots, because we do see a lot of stuff unfortunately happen via like online spaces, then ideally, that person shouldn't be allowed to come back to the corps. Unfortunately, we kind of see this a lot, where because historically corps have not been very much like in contact with each other about these kinds of things. Like a corps might be really good at being like, okay, we're making sure that people who perpetuate harm do not stay at this corps. They are fired, they are gone. But there's very little to stop them from being hired at other corps. And so that is why things like, DCI oversight, or really like kind of circuit level oversight, are very important. That is why I would encourage people to report both at a corps and circuit level if you feel it is necessary, because you feel like your corps is perhaps not taking it seriously. Because unfortunately, that's not standard. Like, I gotta say, there's some corps I've been very impressed with, and there's some corps I have not been very impressed with when it comes to how issues are handled. And so when we're looking at these kinds of things, I would also say, trying to decide how to phrase this. You know what? Maybe it's the end of thought for now. I'll come back to it.
Well, let me just say real quick that I think that one thing that's really important from what you said is like reporting it at your group level and at your circuit level, or if you don't get the follow-up that you want from your group level, report it at the circuit level later. Like, don't don't give up on following up on something,
Mhm.
because I do believe that people, that a lot of times people assume nothing will be done, but it's not always true. It might be slower than you want. It might not be exactly what you want for an outcome, but typically if you report it at both levels, someone is going to follow up, in my experience. And I think it's really important, that how to contact, how do you report something? Like, we go over this with all the students at the beginning of the year. Like, if you need to report something, here's how you do it. You can go to dci.org/whatever. You can go to bluecoats.com/safety. You can email this email address. You can do this. Here's everything that you can do. And we have it right here and it's posted. And so we want you to know that these are the things you can do. And of course, you can come to someone in person. But I think that it's really important that people know that there are many avenues for reporting issues that you do have, and that we want you to tell us, because we also sometimes, something that's been frustrating for me, and I know why people don't want to say anything about stuff, but sometimes I've heard about things 10 years later that there's absolutely nothing I can do about now. And it's not all related to sexual assault. It could be racist acts that occurred. It could be all kinds of things. Certainly would have done something about it. I had no idea. We can't see everything that happens, and I would welcome knowing the things that do happen. So I think that's something really important to, you're not bothering me. It's my job. You're not, you know what I mean? But we
Mhm.
can't fix what we don't know about. So I think that's something really important to stress to incoming people.
Yes, I would like to stress that any core worth their salt who is actually, doing these things to do their due diligence will make it very clear exactly how you are supposed to be reporting things that happen, who you go to, what the process looks like. Ideally, there should be options for anonymous reporting. However, if they don't offer anonymous reporting, that is actually a huge part of why the Mason Whistleblower Support Program exists in the first place. So that if you would like to talk over whatever happened to you with just like some understanding people from the activity beforehand, that's something you can do. If you would like people to help you report, that's something you can do. Something that people have found is useful for is, even if a person wants to be anonymous with a core, we can act as a go-between to, ask them for more information, ask them for screenshots if they have them, and kind of be that contact. Because like, we do always recommend that people report themselves if they can and if they feel comfortable. But if they want that additional support, like, that is why we're here. I guess a lot of people think that we're here to just kind of like throw reports at cores and like be mad about it. And it's like, okay, I am really mad when I see terrible things happen in the activity that I love and put a lot of time and care into. But ultimately, we're here because we want people to be able to kind of get justice in a way that is best suited to them. But also, we want cores to know so that they can actually like take action and make sure these things don't happen anymore, and make sure that they're going to have safe and healthy learning environments for everybody, the kind of phrase that I toss around so much. So yeah, that is something I would stress to people, is your course should give you all the information. If they're not giving you all the information, I very much encourage you to ask. And if it seems like there's something lacking in that process, you should probably talk to somebody.
Cool. I think this one's going to take a little while, so let's move on to the next question, specifically about the health of members. The person who asked the question says that the majority of cores do have access to certified athletic trainers, which may or may not be true, but don't have licensed medical staff, such as doctors, RNs, or nurse practitioners. And then the presence of mental health professionals is nearly non-existent. So what is your opinion of the overall lack of trained health professionals within the activity? And is that something that you've seen in the activity, or is do you see that through a different lens? Nina, let's start with you.
So I have luckily been a part of a couple of organizations that got their first athletic trainer and first part of medical staff. And it is it is an avenue that is desperately still needed in the activity, honestly, just simply because the difficulty comes with actually being able to hire these people to begin with. When you start to get to licensed professionals, you're getting into a budget that the Corps may or may not have at this rate and time, just given the way the activity kind of logistically works. And it's just really hard to keep a person like that on staff full time. However, the presence of athletic trainers has been a very great proponent. What it needs in some cases, since a lot of these programs are actually very new for most of the drum corps that get them, these athletic trainers really just, a lot of them are not necessarily even I guess, familiar with the activity itself or the intricacies of the activity itself. But what happens, what I feel like needs to happen, and this is more of just like a kind of a side note, that sometimes the instructional staff may not necessarily coincide with the ideas of what the personal trainer may want. I've seen a little bit of that conflict in the past with some of the newer, with some new athletic trainers kind of entering into the activity, and they're just kind of like, hey, we need the kids to kind of come off the field right now because it's too hot, and it may be a conflict with some of the way the instructional staff may feel like about pushing the rehearsal. But there's a huge once that, I honestly feel like after a couple of years, if a core is really good about establishing an empowerment towards a personal trainer, then you start to see a great improvement and some of the health and the physical health and care in some of the members. Now, as far as the mental health front is concerned, this is something I personally have been trying to kind of work on as far as the forefront is concerned. It is still, unfortunately, meeting the same kind of fate with having to hire licensed professionals to be there the entire time for the amount of time that they would have to be there, because essentially you are asking for someone to be on call for 24/7 for 85 days straight if you're thinking about putting them on tour. So it becomes a bit of a difficult affair. It is also kind of a twofold experience for anybody who's dealing with mental health, having to actually mentally wrap around the scenarios of what goes on in drum corps and what happens to these kids throughout the season. It is a huge undertaking. It is a very life-changing experience. It really does still need mental health professionals. And hopefully we are here to kind of advocate that more groups actually look into this idea, because nobody has any kind of mental health professionals usually on board. Most of those people, unfortunately, if there are, it is us, the admin, the trusted admin, and usually the trusted cook staff member, that a lot of these people will come to and try to help. We're the veterans that help them figure out what's going on in their entire activity. So it would be really nice to have someone else who is assigned specifically that role to be a part of these different groups. However, we as the admin usually do a lot to make sure that these kids are mentally taken care of and emotionally taken care of. We do our best, and sometimes it's hard for some of the students to come forward. They don't really know that they have anybody that they can turn to. So what we've at least done at Blue Knights for the last couple of years is that we've tried to establish at the very beginning of the season that you can come to the admin. You can come to, in fact, the head admin, and he will give you his phone number. And if you have any issues, you can definitely talk to him. This is the kind of culture we wanted to establish with the admin, or between the admin and the members, in order to kind of compensate for that lack of mental health and emotional and kind of I would say emotional monitoring. I would love to see more of this across the board. It's just unfortunate that you just don't see as much of it. And it's not really because a lot of corps don't necessarily want to do it. They just can't afford it.
I do think there are a lot of creative workarounds with that, though. So when we're talking about, people being stop, I saw it, Cameron. when we're thinking about people being able to kind of take care of their mental health on tour, something interesting that I've heard of a bunch of corps doing is actually allowing students who are already seeing a mental health practitioner, such as a therapist or a counselor, to be able to continue seeing them over course, so that you are in communication with, the caption head to say hey, X member has therapy at 11 a.m. on Tuesdays. Just understand they are not going to be in block for an hour. They're going to come right back. It's totally fine. I think that kind of thing is so important to make sure that people who are already accessing care are able to continue that care to stay mentally healthy throughout the season. And I also do think that something administrative staff can do is also kind of become knowledgeable on kind of resources for these kinds of things, kind of research good crisis lines and kind of keep kind of a couple in your head so that you can share that information with students to be hey, if you are feeling very upset and you would like to talk to somebody who is trained in some way, there are things you can call, there are kind of things you can do. Something that I always recommend to people as well is there's actually several helpful mental health apps you can do that kind of allow you to journal and unpack thoughts and kind of think of things critically and help you process what's going on. Before I got into this, I probably should have mentioned that I do have a Master of Social Work, so this is where this is coming from, in case anybody is wondering. which does like make things a little weird for me as an admin staff as well, because obviously a lot of the mental health piece has kind of defaulted to me in certain situations. But then it's weird because it's like, even when you have people who are certified on tour, like, I don't know if certifications cross state lines. I'm Canadian. I don't even know if I'm allowed to like technically do things in the US. So it ends up being a very strange liability. And of course, I'm obviously going to do my best for any kid that needs my help, but these are things we also have to think about, which is just unfortunate, which is why I always keep a kind of like a mental index of all of these resources. And I would encourage anybody watching this that if you do want like kind of assistance on finding good resources, please contact Mason, and I would love to point you in a good direction of some things that I think could be helpful for people. So
Yeah, so I'll get back to the mental health thing at the end, because I definitely think that's a place that we have to grow big time. But I would just say that the medical staff and training that we have, and professionals that we have, is one of the things that I think has grown the most over my time with drum corps, since starting in the early 2000s till now. DCI actually does require that you have a certified medical professional of some sort with you at every single rehearsal. That is a new requirement in the last couple of years. Every single rehearsal event, to whenever you're together. So that obviously means camps, but also the entire tour. You have to have one person with you at least at all times. Now that can be many different things. It could be an EMT, a nurse, could be a doctor, could be a certified athletic trainer, and honestly, the most valuable one of those to actually be with you all the time is absolutely a certified athletic trainer. So I think the question was actually worded in a kind of misleading way. Just to clarify this, certified athletic trainers are medical professionals, and they are far more equipped to deal with both the like not just injuries, but also basic medical issues that occur on tour than a registered nurse. No offense to registered nurses, but unless you have a long career as something like an ER nurse or something like that, this is not while you can certainly provide, emergency care, like actually seeing and treating patients in the way the certified athletic trainers do, is they absolutely are the best person for the job. So, to go from not really having a lot of professionals and like relying on the cook truck folks back in 2002 to like hand out Band-Aids and stuff, to now where we have 2 certified athletic trainers, 2, by the way, they have master's degrees and oftentimes are working on their doctorates. 2 athletic training interns, usually 2 or 3 of those, who are like doing required training for that master's degree, as well as an EMT on site. I think that is like a vast improvement and can provide a lot of care for your students. Is it perfect? Could we do with more? Yes, but I think that athletic trainers are actually the perfect people to lead that. So I just wanted to clarify that and make people's parents feel confident in that.
a weird interruption.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that and Nina was here a second ago, and now she is not.
Wait, I'm
I can
not.
see her.
It says that we have been disconnected.
I can
I
see
see.
her.
No,
I'm
on the live stream. Oh, see, I
Oh.
can't see. Oh, now we're good. Okay.
No, I think
We
the
are
live stream
back.
is coming back. Okay, yeah, there it
we are
is.
back. We are live.
Okay,
And
we
y'all
were
can see Nina,
connected
okay?
throughout that.
I cannot see Nina.
All right, we
wow.
should probably try to
I can
get
see
back
all
on
of you.
track. We actually only have 10 minutes left
Okay.
on
Yeah,
this.
so let's go ahead and move. Genevieve, I know you had a mental health component. Do you
Oh, that's
want
okay.
to-
I was just gonna say we do
Okay.
have work to do on that for sure. But like, I just want to say it's not just cost; it's also like the licensing thing that Rand was mentioning.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you've ever done BetterHealth or something like that online. How the person is actually has to be licensed in the state where you reside to make it work. So it's not as easy as just even connecting people with those type of practitioners. However, the pandemic has actually opened up a huge new avenue. We found that this past summer, even in our short tour, in which telehealth for mental health and regular physical health with doctors, but especially mental health, is far more available. And we were able to keep people on with their home counselor over the summer, and it was a huge help. So I think that could be a really big help to us as an avenue, because most counselors now, even your regular home one that you didn't get from BetterHelp, like now have telehealth appointments available. And that was far more available than like by times 15 than it ever was in the past. So I think that could be a big help. Not that we shouldn't work on some of the other things, but that helps, especially with the licensing aspect that makes it impossible for someone to really provide care to everyone in your group all the time, even remotely, because of those type of issues.
Totally. So I guess what we can do now is move into some of the community questions. Speaking of which, if any of you are out there live still following our technical difficulties, we are accepting some live questions. If you want to drop that in YouTube chat, we'll be happy to answer those if we have some time. So keeping in the same vein of member health, the first question is going to be, if my child has to come home before the season is over for health reasons or injury, am I responsible for covering emergency travel costs? I would imagine this would vary core to core, but Genevieve, can you maybe tell us about the Blue Coats policy on that?
I would, yes. I mean, certainly if your student has to leave for any reason, you'd be responsible for the travel costs. We certainly try to help it any way we can, but if you need to fly home, I'm not sure how else that would be covered for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, if the member was injured but didn't necessarily have to go home, is that a situation where they could hang out with the drum corps for the rest of the season?
A lot of times yes, but sometimes no. A lot of it depends on what the injury is. Like, for instance, I've had this before. Like, if you do tear your ACL and you can't get on and off the bus, and you can't walk, it sounds crazy, but like, if you have something that makes it so that it's very hard for you to walk all the way to the cook truck to get your food and walk to the gym to get your shower every day, it's pretty impossible for you to be on tour. But there's other types of things that can happen that if it makes sense, you can stay. So it just really, that kind of thing totally varies on a case-by-case basis.
Rand,
it's also not very fun, maybe, but we certainly have had people stay and not stay, or maybe move into another role. It just depends.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've had people get injured before. At Oregon Crusaders in 17, somebody did get pretty seriously injured, but did just end up like staying on for the rest of the season as kind of like an alternate. So she would stand by the sidelines and spin. She was in the guard. And she ended up being kind of helpful, because I mean, she ended up helping me with a lot of stuff, like every time I had to take care of uniforms and whatever. So she was definitely handy to have around, but I wouldn't want to kind of enforce that as like an across the board thing, because I think if somebody's injured, ideally they should be able to like go home and get care instead of just kind of like hanging out and being a volunteer for the rest of the season. It's not really what they paid for, I guess. I would say that if you do get injured during a season and it's partway through the season and you are kind of worried about like, oh, am I going to be able to like, afford to go home right now, or like this emergency flight, if the Corps was going to be able to refund you for a part of your missing season, you could potentially ask about them booking your flight and taking that out of your refund if you wanted to. I'd say that if you are in need of help, it's better to ask than not ask. So always explore your options first.
Yeah, and also just to clarify, like, no one's going to leave. Well, I don't think anyone's going to leave you stranded anywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's not when I like drop you off at the airport and be like, see a kid with a broken leg, like, bye. Like, we're going to help you. Or, I mean, we've had situations where people's parents had to come fly to meet them, but like we left them in the care of other administrative staff until someone got there, or another parent until someone got there. I mean, those type of situations, have happened before. We just, we find a way to make that work.
Yeah, I've
okay, and then let's move into our last question in the last couple minutes. What if one of my woodwind playing students is interested in marching over the summer? Are there opportunities for them? Rand, do you want to start us off on this?
100% yes. Lots of people who do DCI are actually woodwind players in the off season. So people either are self-taught, they get lessons, or a lot of corps are actually willing to help you learn, particularly sound sport and open class corps, because they're kind of tend to be a lot more focused on like the educational aspect of it, and because they do tend to have younger players on average, definitely, please, if you really want to march and you are a woodwind player, that doesn't necessarily have to be a deterrent. So there are several corps that will assist you with that. I would say look for open class first.
Yeah. Genevieve, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a great point. I think
Right.
it's tough. Don't try to make the Blue Devils and the Blue Coats your first day, but like you can do it if you want to. If you really want to do it, go find a place to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Any parting thoughts from either of you before we send it off?
I guess you really can't see me. May not be able to see me. I just wanted to mention about as far as the woodwinds situation is concerned, I also have known drum corps to allow
Sorry, I
students
don't
to actually
know if is Nina still there.
Nina is talking, Cameron.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I have no idea that she's still there. I can't see her.
It's okay. I figured you couldn't.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't see her. Anyways, sorry, Nina. Please continue.
It's okay. It's okay. I just wanted to go ahead and continue. It's just that I've known certain corps to allow students to actually audition initially on their woodwind instrument, just to gauge exact their musicianship and playing ability, especially just something in a natural environment, as well as also like kind of using that as a a step off to seeing them at the next audition. And like was mentioned before, a lot of people I marched. One of my horn sergeants was a bari sax player. So don't ever, and this guy didn't make it initially. Was a matter of fact, when he first auditioned, they told him that he wouldn't be, that he probably should aim for the next season. And he came back the next month and ended up being the horn sergeant. So don't ever let any of that discouragement of not knowing the instrument as a woodwind player discourage you, because you definitely can. I promise you'll be able to learn while you're there. In fact, it is one of the best ways to become a better brass player if it is not your natural instrument.
I would also like to add that there are several sound sport ensembles that do allow woodwind players. So if that interests you, I'd say look for a sound sport ensemble if you would prefer to stay on your home instrument. Cameron, Nina is not talking if you want to wrap.
Nina, I'm so sorry. Anyways, so I guess with that, we're pretty close up against the end of our streaming hour. I do want to thank really quick Genevieve, Rand, and Nina for spending time sharing their expertise with us as our panelists. If you have additional questions, feel free to contact us at info@maasin.net or check out our website, maasin.net, MAASIN. Thanks again for checking out our live stream tonight, and have a great rest of your week. Thanks.